Okay, so let's use this video real quick to talk about what is it going to feel like if I get COVID-19. So basically, with all the studies we've done now, we've determined, the World Health Organization and our National Institute of Health, Dr. Fauci backs it up, that through contact tracing, where they've taken all the contacts of everyone who actually is known to be a case, and they tested all of them, symptoms or no symptoms, under areas where they're doing mass testing. They have found now that only 1% of people experience little to no symptoms from this, and that 99% of people experience a pretty significant illness. Now, for 80% of people, that illness that you experience you're going to feel pretty sick. So don't freak out, okay? If you get COVID-19 and you feel pretty sick, that's normal and that's expected. The same as if you get flu, you're going to feel pretty sick, right? Even though you're a mild case of flu, you don't require hospitalization, it still doesn't feel good. You still know you're sick. There's no doubt you're sick. This is the same thing with COVID-19. Once you catch it, there's no doubt you're sick. You feel sick. You experience fever, you experience a dry cough, and you experience shortness of breath. Now, you may have pain in your bones from your immune system ramping up and making more white blood cells. You're going to have aches, pains, fatigue because of the fever and the immune response, okay? Your primary symptoms are going to be fever, dry cough, and shortness of breath. If you have a runny nose, most likely you do not have COVID-19, because runny nose is only associated with 4% of people who have gotten COVID-19 have had a runny nose. Everybody else mostly experiences a viral pneumonia. And that's because it binds to the tissues of the lungs and not the tissues of the nose and throat primarily. So when you get this disease, it gets to the lung tissue, it binds to the lung tissue, and it lives in the lung tissue, which means that if you have it, even if you have the 80% of people with the so-called mild form of this, if they x-ray your lungs, they're going to see it. So if you've had pneumonia, you know what pneumonia feels like. That's pretty much what COVID-19 feels like. If you haven't had pneumonia before, then you're going to find out, if you get this, what pneumonia feels like, okay? That's what this does. It causes a form of pneumonia. For people that you hear had multi-system organ failure, that's not the disease itself attacking those organs, from what we can tell. That is actually just the result of lack of oxygenation to the organs, or septic shock, which causes your blood pressure to drop really low and your organs don't get oxygenated as well, because they don't get blood flow. So anything that already could cause you to have shortness of breath, heart conditions, asthma, COPD, pulmonary issues, that make you more prone to infection, and your immune system has a harder time fighting it off, cancer, autoimmune diseases with your being autoimmune suppressed, diabetes, those sorts of things, those all greatly increase your risk factors. Being age 80 and over, for instance, has a 15% mortality rate. Overall, the mortality rate for COVID-19 is 3.4%, not 2%. They've now adjusted it to 3.4, now that they've determined, by studying the contacts of everyone who has it, taking their test, watching how their symptoms develop, watching how sick they get when they actually get it, and things like that. Basically leads them to believe we do absolutely not have this big, huge subset of people walking around with mild illness that don't realize they got COVID-19. You get it and you're sick, and you're real sick with a pneumonia-like illness. And most people, 80% do recover at home. They don't require any hospital treatment. You just, cough and cough and cough and cough, have a fever. Your lungs are irritated when you breathe in, and cough and cough and cough, and you have some shortness of breath because those lungs are, they have a bunch of virus invading those tissues. you're having to work a little harder to maintain your normal oxygenation levels, but you do okay on your own without help in 80% of cases. That's going to cause a lot of confusion and panic because in the media it kind of makes it sound like, hey, you could just be walking about, don't even know you're sick, running marathons and whatnot, thinking you maybe have the common cold. That's not the way it's going to go, okay? And so don't freak out and think, oh my God, I'm going to die because you feel real sick. That's normal and that's expected. You're going to feel real sick, but you're going to get better, probably. So just, all in all with COVID-19, I wanted to just dispel these fictional rumors that there's this huge subset of hidden people out there that are sick and infecting other people and don't know they're sick. There really isn't. From all the contact tracing, from all the data that's been collected to this point. Almost every single person who tested positive without symptoms went on to get significantly sick. So you may hear a weird outlier story with people in the 1% that don't necessarily feel sick or only have a little cough and things like that. They may tell their stories and keep in mind, that's typically the 1%. Most people, if you interviewed every person who ever tested positive for flu, there'd probably be some people out there that barely knew they were sick. And there's going to be other people who had the normal presentation of flu, who there was no doubt that they felt bad, that they were sick. Same thing here. If you have it, there can be no doubt. You're not going to be like, could this tiny bit of stuffy nose and body ache be COVID-19? No, probably not. That's probably the common cold or something else because you're not going to have a runny nose, okay? If you're sick, you're going to know it. And so that's basically all I can say is, again, for people that have this, they typically need to cough. They probably won't actually be sneezing. So people saying sneezes, if they happen to sneeze and they have COVID-19 down in their lungs, they may expel some COVID-19 in their sneeze, just a normal sneeze. But, this isn't going to be the achoo disease that allergies may cause. It's not going to be, I can't taste my foods, I can't smell, I feel a little crappy. This is going to be fever, coughing, shortness of breath, body aches, fatigue, and that's the normal presentation. That's what's to be expected. And I really want to avoid surging the ERs and the urgent cares with 80% of people who heard on the news that this was quote unquote mild. And then because they feel the normal presentation of COVID-19, freak out and think that they're one of the people who are going to die and rush in to the ERs and hospitals, because we still have 15 to 20 people out of 100 people really do need to go to the hospital. Their shortness of breath has progressed to the point where they do need medical intervention. They do need heavy antibiotics to prevent secondary bacterial opportunistic diseases entering that inflamed lung tissue that would make it even harder to breathe. So, please think about all the people, the 15 to 20 out of 100 that really do need to be in the ER. They really do need to be admitted to the hospital for help. And if you get COVID-19 and you have no comorbidities, you have no other diseases, you're a healthy young person, you have a healthy kid, no asthma or something like that, and they get COVID-19, you're just going to treat them at home like you normally would, okay? Unless your fever is really high, you probably don't want to load up with antipyretics like Tylenol and ibuprofen because your fever serves a function, right? It is helping the immune system to fight this disease. We don't want to knock that out if you're staying well hydrated and everything. So as long as you can stay real well hydrated and the fever won't dehydrate you and it's not making you just absolutely past the point of being able to, deal with it and stuff. Like, if it's not high, I'd say, If it's anywhere up to like 102 that you're experiencing, and you're able to drink plenty of fluids, then you can probably leave it alone. You don't necessarily need to give yourself ibuprofen and Tylenol and make your immune system take longer to fight it. You do want to, you know, you do want to just let your immune system do what it's got to do. Um, and, maybe you want to, for instance, since you have this nasty dry cough, cough drops, a humidifier in your room, to help with that dry cough. Stay really well hydrated and that sort of thing. So mostly here, we're just going to be treating the symptoms at home, when we're sick, if we get sick with it. And then, of course, like I said, if any point in time you suddenly go from the initial kind of manifestation that it came on as, about day 5 after you get this and you start having the symptoms, you suddenly get worse, you suddenly get much sicker, you suddenly have air hunger where you feel like you can't catch your breath, you see any blueness under your fingernails, the tips of your fingers, your toes, your lips, you're feeling, dizzy, you're, beyond the fever, like because you can't catch your breath. If you can't get, you should be able to reasonably get up from your bed, walk to the bathroom, to go to the bathroom, walk back to your bed with only very limited shortness of breath, okay? If you're so short of breath that you have a hard time speaking, you have a hard time walking to the bathroom and back, you're significantly short of breath, you should take your butt to the ER. If it's just a little, like you kind of notice that there's a little bit of shortness of breath when, like you couldn't sing necessarily, but you can talk just fine. That you couldn't really go run around, but you can walk around the house at a normal speed, and you just have this very mild in the background shortness of breath feeling along with your coughing. That's normal. If it gets worse and any of those things happen, then you may be the 15 to 20% that needs to go to the hospital and get evaluated. Please follow your local health department and what they tell you to do. If they tell you, yes, go to the hospital, call your regular doctor, consult with them, those sorts of things. Of course, if it's Friday night at midnight, and you get to the point where you're questioning, should I be this short of breath? If you're really questioning, should I be this short of breath? You're probably getting short of breath enough where you probably need to go in and get that looked at. Find out what your pulse, what your oxygen saturation levels are in your body. Make sure that you're really maintaining those, in the low to high 90s to 100 range. If you're, dropping your oxygen sats like to 90, 89, 88, you definitely need to be in the hospital getting looked at for that. You don't want to sit around with, too low of oxygen saturations if you have a pulse ox at home. So I hope that kind of gets people prepped and understanding why they changed the mortality rate to 3.4% once they got more data. It's because they realized there's not a bunch of asymptomatic cases hidden that we didn't catch. Of course, we're not catching everyone who's sick with it. There are people all over the planet right now that are sick with this, and they're not in hospital beds. They're in their homes. They haven't gone to get tested, but it's not, ultimately going to affect the 80%. It's not going to affect how many are in the 10 to 15% who require hospitalization, the 5 to 10% requiring ICU, and the overall 3.4% that'll die, just because they're not getting tested, because they can't in some areas, doesn't mean that any big time people think that it is so significant that it's going to have much of an impact on the newly calculated mortality rate. So I hope that helps you to understand and dispel some myths and realize that, hey, I'm going to feel pretty bad, but that doesn't mean I'm dying. I just really don't want the 80% of people being like, well, it's supposed to just feel like a little cold. It's going to feel more than that. It's going to feel crappy, but 96.6% chance ultimately you'll be okay. All right, guys. So I'll talk to everybody later, and We're going to get through this one way or another.